welcome back to the Ultraviolet Tide and welcome to season 3 of the podcast. I am so excited that we are launching into our third season of the podcast and diving into more of the stories that you all love about the skin cancer community, about the top stories, about healthcare, about sun safety, and a little bit of everything in between. This has been such a fun outlet to really dive into all things when it comes to health and wellness and skin cancer. So, to kick off the podcast, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Elianna of Modern Ritual, and we're going to try something different. So, before I hop on with Elianna, I am going to give a brief introduction so that when we hop on this call, we dive right into the good stuff. So, Elianna is the co founder of Modern Ritual, and she leads partnerships and new business development for the company. Elianna graduated from UNC at Chapel Hill in 2018 with a degree in business administration and management and a minor in public policy. She currently resides in New York, and after seeing her father get treated for skin cancer in 2018, she partnered with her mother, who is actually a leading skin cancer surgeon. So, together, their mission is to expand access to skin healthcare options to prevent and detect skin cancer. So, Modern Rituals virtual dermatology platform helps patients and primary care providers basically triage their patients' dermatology concerns. And when Eliana reached out and we really hopped on a call and started talking about all these things about her business and the pivots that her company has made over the past couple years, I knew that this would be such an impactful conversation about not only skin cancer, but also business and entrepreneurship and company growth. So let's dive into this first episode of season 3 with Eliana of Modern Ritual. We are diving straight into season 3 of the podcast, and I have a wonderful guest joining me today, Eliana of Modern Ritual. So, we're going to dive right into your background, starting with your time at UNC-Chapel Hill, majoring in business administration and management, and how your experience was in college, and then shaping you to where you are today. And I know there's a lot of in between. So, let's start with the college years and your majoring in business.
So, as a student at UNC, I was classically unsure of what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. I thought that I might go into consulting one day, but even prior to studying business, I had always been more inclined towards, I would say, building necessarily. I'd looked at a lot of engineering programs before applying to the business school because I thought maybe I wanted to start a company one day, and if I wanted to build something, I should know the ins and outs of how to make it. I probably should have looked more at computer science than necessarily mechanical engineering, as I was told, but I ended up still finding my way over to the entrepreneurship side. When I was graduating from the undergraduate business program at UNC, I learned about a program called Venture for America, and it's an opportunity for people who think they might want to start a company to go ahead and work in an early stage startup or in a venture capital fund to kind of learn the ins and outs of building a company. And so I like to think some things for my business degree still apply, but I would say a lot of what I've learned since, starting a company now did come from those few years working alongside other entrepreneurs and alongside other early grads who were interested in building and tinkering and starting their own things on the side.
Yeah, and this was while you were working at Boeing in the aerospace venture capitalist space. Is that correct? That's kind of you got thrown right into that kind of environment, it sounds like.
Yeah, when I was applying to different roles through VFA, Venture for America, I had looked at everything from a two-person early stage granola company to an AI for car dealerships. And then this small startup called Boeing, who had this really neat role where they had been investing in early stage aerospace companies and they were looking for an analyst to join their team. And so, like analyst, you're doing anything and everything that needs to get done. So that included setting up a Salesforce instance for the company and a pipeline to going to Spain and meeting with a startup founder. And it was just
Wow.
really this wild ride. But most importantly, I think I got to learn so much from the founders that we were working with around what it takes to build a truly transformational business, from one that can make a rocket to fly you out to space to different ways of having propulsion and all of these different really interesting complex topics that now whenever I think something is complex, I can say it's at least not as complex as aerospace, where you really are going into a lot of
Right.
heavy technical work along the
Totally.
way.
When people say it's not rocket science, you can say, "Oh, no, it literally was."
It truly was, but I developed a really great appreciation for all of the work, and I think also you come in as a startup founder and you often hear for so long, like, "We should be breaking things, we should be rebuilding," and what I learned while I was there is half the time we were going to people at Boeing who had worked for 20, 30 years in an industry and saying, "What do you think about this category? What have you learned over the years of what makes this space so hard to innovate in?" Not to say that someone can't come in and do something really innovative and new, but that way, as we're working with founders, or we were at the time, you can have empathy for what's ahead and
Right.
what are all of the different nuances that make it such a fun, hairy, complex problem in the first place. And that comes from having lots and lots of experience in a space as well.
Right, and hearing directly from them what would be beneficial, and so you're getting all of this fantastic, hands-on experience, you have a major in business to kind of back it up, but on a more personal note, your family background, and we're gonna get to modern ritual here in a second, I promise we're gonna loop it in, but all of this background really does lend itself to why the company became what it did, because your personal background, I mean, your mom is a leading skin cancer surgeon, and you also had a very personal story with your dad's skin cancer journey that really started the movement behind, at the time, Get Mister, and now what is Modern Ritual.
Completely. And just as that time period was going on, I always encourage now anyone who's thinking about starting a company that you really do have time. When I was first starting that job, all I could think about for the first year, 2 years was just learning how to work and how to be someone who has a
Right.
career and is balancing all the things. But
Mhm.
after about a year, that was really where, like you mentioned, personally, my I grew up in a healthcare household, and so my father's a primary care doctor, and like you mentioned, my mom's a dermatologist. But even my dad, who has excellent access to care, started to notice he had a few spots that ended up being precancers and skin cancers removed. And my mom and I started thinking together, you know, there are so many people who don't have this access to a dermatologist like your father and also are on these 6 months waits. Imagine if your dad had to wait 6 months to get his spot removed and what that might have
Right.
looked like. And
Mhm.
so for us, especially as we were moving into COVID, my mom and I started really thinking about, well, I'm getting all this great startup experience. And my mom was saying, I have this industry experience, like I mentioned before, which is so incredibly valuable to have years and years of working in a space and understand the complexities. And so we came together and said, what would happen if we actually tried to start a company that, as you mentioned, first was looking at prevention and skin cancer prevention through a sunscreen product that would target men. And then what has ultimately turned into an early detection startup that's focused on helping more people see and know whether their spots, their rashes, or otherwise might be worrisome and what they can do about it if that's the case.
So with Get Mister, we were talking about this like when we first were introduced, we hopped on a call and we're talking about all these things. And specifically, we started talking about men's healthcare. And that's what Get Mister was. It was really a healthcare startup geared towards men. And What were some of the findings that you started to learn? I mean, you saw this concern with your dad, and I believe you have brothers as well. So you probably saw firsthand, with your mom being a dermatologist, she probably told you guys all the time, wear sunscreen, and you might have been receptive to it, and your brothers might have been like, I don't know about that. Did you use these experiences to help fuel those initial days of Get Mister?
There were really two main areas when we were starting the company that we were thinking through. One of them, we actually ran a study that ended up getting published in a peer reviewed journal called Men's Attitudes and Behaviors Towards Sunscreen and Skincare. So,
Mhm.
went through comprehensively and understood from men themselves, not just what my mom and I were thinking, but truly asking
Right.
hundreds of men, how do you look at skincare products? How do you look at sunscreen? What are the attributes that are most important to you? So we'll put a bucket or a little note there. The second was, to your point, I don't think I was receptive at that age, maybe around 13, 14, to wearing sunscreen. What I was receptive to was makeup, and that I started playing around and wearing makeup when I was 13 or 14. And it just so happened, actually, a lot of my foundation had sunscreen
Mhm.
inside. So I started to develop this habit of wearing sunscreen early without necessarily even recognizing that I was doing it. And I think that's brushing your teeth. There's a lot of habits
Right.
you form early because you don't want to have bad breath, right? You're not necessarily thinking about your gum health yet.
Right.
And I think those two experiences we're saying early on, I want to be really empathetic to what are the very different reasons some people. And what we learned was there are there's definitely a messaging that will work, which is here are the health benefits for you when you start to develop this healthy habit. Here is the outcomes you can expect to see. We started to see a lot of men who are very, I would say, direct. You didn't have to beat around the bush. You could say it very directly, and they would be really receptive. But you had to show
Mhm.
the proof.
Right.
They wanted more proof to what we were saying and the claims and the validity and what was inside. And then there was another group that they were looking at, how will this make me feel? What will be
Mm.
the I want to look good. I want to feel good every day. And those messaging and those were equal. I wanted to say those were equally valid customers and users. And so I would get onto calls early on with a lot of our customers, and I would hear all of these stories saying, this is the first time I've had this habit, and I can't believe I didn't do this before. It makes
Mm.
me mad I didn't do this earlier. And I'm so happy that I've been able to develop this routine. So those were some of the different players and levers that we were working with.
Yeah, I love it. And it very much is one of these things where once you develop kind of a habit of doing it, so a good practice, you don't even think about doing it. So you mentioned, like brushing your teeth and whatever your motivation behind it is. The same, being skincare for a lot of women, the motivations like anti aging and stuff like that. We don't always dive into what are the motivating factors for men. So you were really doing that in a space that doesn't always have the most voice for men. It's very much primarily geared towards women. So that was Get Mister. And then you started pivoting into Modern Ritual after I think was it a few years in between there, or it was COVID years. So I know that timing is a
The
little
time
different.
frame is always wild, right? No.
Yeah.
So what was really interesting with Get Mister was about 60% of our customers were women, and they were
Yeah.
gifting it, right? And we talked
Yeah.
about this a little bit together. It was moms, it was girlfriends, wives, and a lot of them were gifting it to men in their lives. Some of them were using it themselves, I'm sure, but
Right.
um and there was this aspect of that first group of bucket where they want the proof in the pudding. A lot of time that proof came from, I trust my girlfriend's judgment that this is going to be a good product if
Right.
it came from her, or I
Mhm.
trust my dermatologist, and that was my mom who was kind of promoting this brand and this product as something she really created. But because of that customer base, a lot of these women would tell us, I have a history of skin cancer. And
Mm.
your messaging, your why for this company really resonates with me.
Mhm.
And through those conversations, both online and on TikTok, where we started growing, a lot of them would say, I'm having trouble seeing my dermatologist, even though I have a history of skin cancer. Is there anything that you guys are doing about that or can do about that? And that's really where a lot of the inspiration for Modern Ritual came, which is what's happening in that space? Why are people coming to us here versus
Right.
going to the dermatologist? And where we really quickly learned that, as we said before, the access I was really fortunate to have growing up, so many people don't have that access. I actually studied public health and public policy in undergrad as well, alongside business. And that's where I started to pull a lot of that background from and to investigate what are a lot of the different barriers that are keeping so many people. And right now, where I'm from in North Carolina, as one example, we talked with a patient who said, most, dermatologists won't accept Medicaid in North Carolina, and
Yeah.
that creates, just in and of itself, a whole host of
Right.
barriers, even if your wait time's not short, if your insurance doesn't cover it. So that's really some of the issues that were at play when we wanted to look into pivoting and starting our
Mhm.
digital health company.
Yeah, and we also, when we were talking about, the basis behind the company, we talked a lot about that early detection and access to care being two of our primary kind of like red flag points of trying to get care there, because that early detection is so important in skin cancer, especially melanoma when it's rapidly progressing, but all forms of skin cancer, all forms of cancer, all forms of health concerns. I mean, a lot of these things, the longer you wait, the more they progress. So this is something where it is like, it's not a want to get into the dermatologist, it's a physical need to get in and get your healthcare concerns taken care of before it progresses.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about skin cancer because, of course, that's really where a lot of this started for us. And in these conversations, I've now heard there's folks who have said, I've never gone to a dermatologist and have hair loss on the back, and it's always made me, or
Mhm,
I've always had this rash on my arms, and I feel like I don't have a dermatologist who might be able to relate, or well, there's
mhm.
a lot of other issues that I've gotten
Right.
to hear from our users about, that are these variances and scenarios that impact them as it relates to dermatology. And so
Mhm.
I think with modern ritual, that's really where we've thought about holistically. Everyone deserves access. It's a
Yeah.
fundamental need to be able
Mhm.
to have the health care that they deserve,
Yeah.
whether it has to do with something as severe, of course, as melanoma, but something, our skin is so visible. It's the first thing
Right?
that people see. And so
Yeah.
we know how much that impacts mental health. It impacts, if you're itchy, that can sometimes be more worrisome than pain and
Mhm.
bothersome and impact your mental health. And so there's just so many layers to this problem.
Yeah, agreed. And then, we always see things. I mean, I'm speaking we as the listeners, they see things from the basis of like going to a doctor, right? So they're not seeing the things that are happening behind the scenes and how busy they might be and all of these things. They're only seeing what the dermatologist is giving them when they go into the office of, did they seem too busy? Did they seem to not understand? Did they seem to, all of these things from the patient standpoint is what our community really starts to see. And you start to have things trickle down where if the dermatologists are too busy or maybe they don't have the most resources, that trickles down to the patient. And then they get frustrated or overwhelmed or feel like their best interest isn't at heart as well.
Yeah. I think that's at Modern Ritual where I feel so lucky that we have had the experiences of a dermatologist on our founding team, because I think it'd be really easy for me to come in here and again say, we need to break dermatology, we need to do it all. And in reality, dermatologists are working, they have 6 months wait. That's never an ideal. They're having to move through patients
Yep.
so fast. And so for our stamp, and we hear it from patients where they're frustrated, like you were saying.
Right.
And so I think for our company, which I'm sure we'll dive into, is that if you can create a win, which is improving the experience for the dermatologist so they don't feel like they're overworked and overburdened, a win for the
Mhm.
patients, they feel like they're getting
Yep.
the quality time, attention, care, and access they need. And then
Mhm.
you have to figure out the business model and everything else that's the win
Right.
for the healthcare system, right? That's a whole other
Right.
bucket. That was really where we said, okay, if we can get all of that right, then we're actually onto something here.
Yeah, definitely. And I do want to dive into that mission because part of that mission is what we've already talked about, that early detection, access to care, but also your fundamental belief that your skin health is part of your overall health and you should be going to a dermatologist just like you should primary care. So let's dive a little bit more into that mission.
Yeah. So our mission at Modern Ritual is to ensure everyone has timely access to dermatologic care that they need and deserve. That's just our fundamental. And there today, as we noted, when we started hearing from patients that they were struggling for months or driving hours to get seen for a dermatology appointment, that just isn't acceptable on so many layers.
Mhm.
But as we think about what is available, we know that there are often primary care doctors, like my dad, who's on the other side of my family, right? Who are much more local and accessible. And
Mhm.
so our way of engaging with patients is we partner with primary care doctors. We give them access to a virtual dermatology platform alongside a high resolution camera called a dermatoscope. And that allows you, and you can imagine Erica as a patient, to be able to book an appointment the same day with
Mhm.
your PCP. They would take a photo of whatever was of concern, that spot that you were worried about for skin cancer, to the rash. And then that photo would be immediately assigned to one of our virtual dermatologists, who's a board certified dermatologist. And in that same day, you as the patient get a call back saying, Erica, we know what's wrong. We know how to help you. And
Mhm.
whether that's a prescription, peace of mind that your spot's okay, or an expedited appointment for a biopsy or otherwise, that's the future that we're creating already
Mhm.
right now for hundreds and thousands of patients all over, which is really, again, now, if you do need to get in faster for an in person dermatologist, you know that you should drive that extra hour because
Right.
unfortunately, there's still a lot of other issues around where
Right.
dermatologists are and all of that. But you as a
Yeah.
patient don't want to drive 2 hours or an hour to a dermatologist for something that's benign or fine or
Right.
normal. You want that confidence that this is important, or um, the ability to say, actually, you can wait 4 to 6 months. This isn't urgent. And you know,
Mhm.
okay, now I have some peace of mind waiting that 4 months for my next in person appointment, things of that nature.
Yeah, and it's solving so many issues all at once, and I know you can't solve the world's problems one problem at a
We'd
time,
love
but this
to. We'd like
I
to.
know. I know, one problem at a time, one day, hopefully all of these issues, but you are solving one of the biggest, and that's just access to care. And a lot of these primary care physicians, they have the skill set and they might have a little bit more time, but they might not have like the mechanisms to test it or the tools in office in order to do it. So by giving them, access to these board certified dermatologists, what they're doing is they can say, all right, now I have the resources, I have the access, I can provide care for you, whereas before they might not be able to.
Yeah. And we have to now, because of the way our company's structured, we really have to think about what's the experience for the primary care doctor. What
Yeah.
happens when they tell you, that patient, I think it's fine, but I'd still recommend you go in person for a
Mhm.
dermatologist, maybe. They know it's a
Yeah.
6-month wait. That's, or they know their health system isn't accepting new dermatology patients.
Right.
They're frustrated, they're not happy. And so, where we've really been able to do is design this system that's geared towards a better experience for the primary care doctor, who
Yeah.
is often asked to act like a dermatologist when you're
Right.
leaving your appointment. You're like, oh, I also have this spot, and
Right.
they're not seeing hundreds of thousands of patients like this. They're really great and incredible, but we
Mhm.
know the literature shows us time and again that there is a discrepancy between a PCP diagnosis and a dermatology diagnosis. And that might
Mhm.
mean you have to go in for a second appointment, or that a patient might end up at the ER,
Right.
or they wait months for a melanoma. And that's really just where we want to help.
Mhm.
And so we've been in a number of primary care offices and rural pharmacies, and free and charitable clinics, direct primary care. So we've really been able to work with a whole host of care settings and scenarios that sometimes you don't think of as care settings. There's groups that will go ahead and set pop-up clinics, and we've been able
Mhm.
to work with them as well and train them how to use our platform.
Yeah, and that's so important. I mean, I know I hear all the time, and having tools like this, I need to reset my mindset in a way because people will tell me, they're like, "Oh, I went to my primary care doctor for an appointment. I just asked them to take out a spot, and they said it's of no concern." And my brain immediately goes to, "Okay, well, okay. hold up. Please go to a board certified dermatologist. But this is kind of rewiring those kinds of processes where people can say, oh, I did. And don't worry, they actually did get a test and they did do these things. So there's a little bit of rewiring of my brain too, because for so long, that's just how things were done, right? You have to go to a specialist because they've been trained to do this, but you're removing that barrier overall.
And truly do. We have partnerships with dermatology clinics to say, we are still recommending if you can get into a dermatologist and it's a easy experience and
Yeah.
they'll accept you, incredible. Always first stop.
Hmm.
Um, but we know that's not the case for so many people.
Yeah.
And so we say, have your appointment with your dermatologist. Let's say it's 6 months away. You see something you're worried about, do not wait. Go
Hmm.
in today, go in this week, get it checked out with your PCP. They'll have a board certified dermatologist. And if they see that it's worrisome, we will help you get in faster.
Yep.
Don't wait the 6 months. So it's
Yep.
not about removing the in person dermatologist, but again, just thinking through how do we reduce wait times, improve the triage, and then get you answers faster. So you're not
Right.
sitting there waiting or having an unnecessary biopsy done, just like you were saying, where
Right.
there is this one in doubt, cut it out, right? Like
Right.
we can hopefully reduce a lot of the trauma of cuts and procedures through having this dermoscopic image or this high resolution camera help take the photo of the spot of concern.
I think it's so important that you touch on the fact that this isn't a replacement, this is an enhancement tool. So, this is not to replace your primary care provider. This is not to replace your dermatologist. This is an enhancement tool to get you seen when you need to be seen.
Yeah, completely. And we do have patients who will come directly to us, and we are able to do a virtual initial triage for rashes, for hair loss, for wound care on our platform directly. And so we can help patients in that scenario. What we
Mhm.
always say is you will get the best answer and the best care when you can go and get the photo taken by your PCP. Just as an
Yeah.
example, if you have a spot on your back, it's going to be really hard for you to get a good
Right.
photo. Maybe your partner can come in and take that, but if you're home, whatever this looks like,
Yeah.
it's always helpful to go ahead and get that photo taken by your PCP or ask your primary care provider if they can start offering a service with Modern Ritual. But we know that not everyone has a PCP who's signed up with us yet. And so we will often also work directly with patients and help them um, get answers quickly through our site as well.
I love it. And I have to ask, what is it like working with your mom?
Oh my gosh. It's so funny. She sadly had COVID yesterday, but she's
Oh.
still a full-time dermatologist. She runs a very large private practice in North Carolina, but she was home all day. And so we were on Zoom all day yesterday, working through contracts and
Mhm.
processes. And she is at the end of the day, my mom. And she wants to see this succeed because not only does she love me, but this is what she spent her entire last 30 years thinking about every
Yeah.
day. And so her passion is palpable. It makes it so fun to get
Yeah.
to see each other in this new light where yes, I'm the CEO and I get to see how much she knows and as a professional and a career woman. And, um, but we have to do meditation before we start working together because we are both very ADD. We are both so excited and strong minded. And
Yeah.
so we both are yogis and we will do a little flower meditation at the beginning. And we both know if we have not done that together. So we'll sometimes pause mid session and go back to that. But it's not like I think starting a company with a partner or a boyfriend
Mm,
or a husband is sometimes
yeah,
even harder because
for sure.
they become blood, but they're not yet your blood. This is truly blood. I'm not emancipating from my mom. She really is forever
Yeah.
going to be that on that side for us.
Mhm.
So it's definitely been a learning process for us, but I will be happy if anyone listening has ever considered um, starting anything in a family business and know that it's a journey.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to ever and always anyone who reaches out wants to talk about that experience.
Yeah, I'm sure it comes with its own unique set of challenges. I mean, even if it's a friend or a random person, I mean, not random, but obviously you vetted them, but like whoever you're partnering with when it comes to startups and entrepreneurship, it's always crazy. It's always high tension. It's always stress. So it presents itself in sometimes not the most ideal form of what you want to present to the world that your family member gets to see. And I feel like it's nice that it's someone who's like, guess what? You're my mom. You can't do anything. Sorry. Let's move past it.
She might kill me for saying this story. We had something we were sending out, and she responded back. It was a good thing. We got a good big contract. She replied back all, "Congrats!" all caps, like, "You're great. So excited for this next chapter." It was a reply all. It was not just to
Oh,
me. So
that's
everyone
so
on
funny.
the thread saw, but like you'd rather that, right? To know that
Right,
we're excited for each other, we cheer. But it's
right.
one of those moments where I just go, I mean, it's my mom. Like, it,
So cute. I love that. Oh,
yeah,
I
yeah,
love that so much. Hey, that's so much better than being like, "Oh my gosh, we messed this up. What are you doing?"
right, right.
Yep.
Or like, why is there not three more zeros? Why is there only six
Right.
zeros? Right at
Right,
the end,
right. The
like
classic
there's,
tough love.
yeah, exactly. Biggest cheerleaders for sure.
I love it. So it sounds like, you guys have the building blocks for something that's really going to change healthcare, especially when it comes to dermatology. So what is this the future? What do the next few years look like? What are you all working toward?
Well, I can share right now that, I mean, everything we do will stay aligned with that mission of expanding access to specialty care and doing so in a way that is cost affordable for patients so that we know at the end of the day, right now, a lot of that will require us to interact with payers more and more to make sure that we're creating a service that is accessible for all patients. That's really what I go back to every single time. If this only works for a subset of patients, we haven't succeeded
Mm,
in our mission. And so that's where you could think alongside, as well as continuing to expand our partnerships and health systems and bringing this to as many locations across the US as possible.
I love it. I'm hoping DC is close on that list. I know you guys already have some kind of in the nearby area, but
Yeah.
as someone who lives and works in DC with so many other people trying to get care, it is a pain in the butt, not going to lie.
Yeah. Well, we would love, so that's why we always encourage, if there's anything that anyone listening or in your network, Erica, that is
Mhm.
looking for care, don't hesitate to reach out. We're always happy on our team to chat with you, to try to help and just find resources within our network. Um, or if you've recently been diagnosed, we on TikTok, we've posted hundreds of videos on and
Mm,
content all around things to consider if you've been diagnosed, or treatment preparation, or really truly we try to understand and think through the entire experience,
mhm.
and where we can just maybe even be a little bit helpful. So I always say don't hesitate to reach out, or even just to share your story, because
Yeah.
that's why we're here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I always tell people the same thing. I mean, those stories really help fuel the work that we do. And I feel like even though we're in different industries, I feel like it's very similar in terms of like the effect that this is having on individual lives. And sometimes when you can hear it, it makes the hardship, it makes some of the things that are a little bit trickier on the day to day well worth it.
Yeah, completely. And I'm always happy to share for any we can, Eric and I talked for an hour. There's so much to go through. And so I think, to your point, like going back always to the why. And if you are going to be working in healthcare, your why better be good.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. I love it. And I know people listening, they're going to want to connect with you. They're going to want to connect with Modern Ritual. So if they are listening, where can they find you online to continue the conversation?
We're very easy to access on our website. So modernritual.com, MODERNRITUAL. And then we are also on TikTok. I would always recommend first going to Derm Dr. Goldstein, Derm
Hmm.
Dr. Goldstein on TikTok, which is where we share pretty much everything on, as I mentioned before, skin cancer, and also just skincare health overall, and education around when we're doing new things. And then I'll just put the Elianna, my first name, at getmr.com. I put my email out there. I think it should be
Yep.
easy. to access me in case there's anything ever anyone wants to get in touch with about for what we're doing.
I love it. And we'll include all this in the show notes so that people can easily reach out, continue the conversation. But Elianna, thank you so much for your time and sharing a little bit more about modern ritual with us today.
Thank you so much for having me and everything you're doing, Erica. It's amazing.